Hi, I'm Len Epp from Leanpub, and in this episode of the Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Marcin Moskała. Marcin is an experienced developer and Kotlin trainer and popular speaker. He is the founder of the KT Academy, Kotlin GDE, and an official JetBrains partner for teaching Kotlin. You can follow him on Twitter at Marcin Moskała and check out his website at marcinmoskała.com and check out KT Academy at kt.academy and on YouTube at ktacademy.com. Marcin is the author of a number of Leanpub books, including Effective Kotlin, Functional Kotlin, and most recently, Kotlin Essentials. In Kotlin Essentials, he shows you everything you need to know to get started with the Kotlin programming language in clear and executable code examples. In this interview, we're going to talk about his background and career, professional interests, his books, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about his experience on Leanpub specifically. So thank you very much for being on the Leanpub Front Matter podcast.
Thank you for having me here. Good to see you, Len.
Good to see you, and thank you for taking time out of your later in the evening for you than it is in the sort of afternoon for me. So I was wondering, if you could talk a little bit about the story about yourself and your books and all the great work that you've produced over the last few years.
Yes, the books I'm currently creating are kind of a story of a last 6 years of my life. 6 years ago, I decided to publish a book about Kotlin. I was already writing articles about it, speaking about it, and I was quite experienced with that. Even though Kotlin might seem like a very young language, I was already a Kotlin user for quite some time. Kotlin is developed since 2010, and we've been using it far before it reached its production-ready state. So I checked this today. In 2017, I decided to write a book with my friend Igor Wojda, and that we titled Android Development with Kotlin. Actually, I wanted to title it differently. The pact forced this title on us because it's not really about Android development. It's about Kotlin for Android development. But the title we wanted to use was already taken. And well, we put our heart into that, and we were. I think it was a good enough book, but I haven't felt satisfied. I felt that I could do much more than that. And, I started developing my teachings of Kotlin, my metaphors. I started conducting workshops, of course, speaking on conferences, but all those workshops were my primary source of feedback and improvement. I recently checked that I conducted over 100 workshops during those 6 years about Kotlin, most of them about Kotlin, 3 days workshops from basics to advanced topics. And, over that time, I first published Effective Kotlin that was quite well received, and Kotlin coroutines that was also very, very well received. But I always felt that, the mission of providing a really good book about Kotlin for developers from beginning to advanced topics, like my big book of everything I want to say and give to people was growing in me and still wasn't expressed. And so I finally decided, like 2 years ago, that it is the time. I started writing that, and then it turned out that this book would be huge. I've noticed it would take over 700 pages if it were a single book. So I started dividing that, organizing topics in a way that each part is interesting and can be read in separation. And this way I created I am creating my current series of books, the series that starts with the Kotlin essentials, with all the essentials about Kotlin, and functional Kotlin, with the essential functional features, collection processing, and all the functional stuff in Kotlin. And the book I'm currently writing, that is Advanced Kotlin, it truly go into really advanced topics like Kotlin symbol processing, annotation processing, plugin compilers, multi-platform development, generic variance modifiers, and all the truly advanced topics that I always wanted to, finally place in a very readable way on a book, and I never had a place where I could actually express it well. Also, I will add that my dream of this series included to make the covers that are matching with each other. I can already show you the first two. It's not so visible because there are only two of them, but you see they start forming a shape. And the next one will continue that. Actually, if you check it out, it is consistent with back and front, and there will be more of those books because I want to make a big Kotlin series together with the Kotlin coroutines and effective Kotlin. Other two books that are really well received, also published on Leanpub, also distributed on Amazon on a physical form, and they will together form this amazing shape on the shelf that is fully consistent with the covers of those books.
Thanks very much for sharing that story. That's so great. I really love the idea that there's this kind of like Easter egg that if if you have the books all on the shelf, like you'll see this sort of shape going down like that. But if you took them all together and turned them, you would see that the sort of angle matches on the cover. Yeah. That's just fantastic. And one thing I would say to anyone listening, is that like the attention to details like that is something that readers really love. They love to see when authors do things like that.
Yeah, thank you. I actually put my heart into that. It is challenging in a way. It will block changing the size of those books in the future, but I am prepared for that. If I will want to add something, I will need to remove something. What is actually quite a good process for the books. Book is ready when you cannot remove anything from it, not when you cannot add anything to that.
Oh no, that's a super interesting detail. So for people who are like interested in this kind of thing, like when you make design decisions like that, it has these consequences, including kind of constraints for you. But those, as Marcin is saying, those constraints can actually be like really good in the end, because like if as an author, especially if you really love what you write about and things like that, you always want to add more and more or always change it and stuff like that. But having constraints like that can actually really help you kind of focus and get things out there for the readers who are just they're out there waiting for your work and they want it to come out. And sometimes you sort of you can do them a disservice by sort of waiting too long and things like that. I'm curious, how many books do you think you're going to have in the series, given your 5 kind of intentions? 5. Okay.
Actually, I think I will be done after 5. In terms of Kotlin, at least I have a bunch of other projects, but it will be, I think, everything I have truly interesting, essential, and important to say, and I'm not willing to write about things I do not find truly important. So I'm not writing for writing. I'm writing to share something, and that's why I am not willing to grow this collection infinitely. I have other things. I have other things with mission. I want to write. Some of them are also connected to Leanpub. But yeah, I think for Kotlin, unless I truly start doing something new, and I will have some truly interesting content that I feel best to share with people. Unless that, I do not plan to publish any other books in this discipline.
And just going up a few levels. So for those listening, I mean, I'm sure most of our listeners are sort of programmers and they've heard of Kotlin and things like that. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what Kotlin is and sort of when it got started and how it's progressed over time. I know when I was researching for this interview, I saw a few interviews that you did where you talked about it, like there was when you first got involved, it was kind of a hipster kind of thing, but because you were very early on. But yeah, so if you could talk just for a moment about like where Kotlin came from, what it is, and who uses it.
Kotlin, I believe, came as a alternative to Java during the times when Java was worse than it is right now. They started working on Kotlin before Java even reached version 8. So before it included Lambda expressions or stream processing. So back then, Java was truly, not a very convenient language to use, and Kotlin was made as a recipe. I actually believe Kotlin is more or less what Java would be if Java would be progressing and modernizing as it should. So it includes all the modern features that Java never included. It made all the decisions or changes that Java was never tough to make. Of course, some of them you might say they're quite impossible to make in Java, because you would make a completely different language, like null safety mechanisms that need to be built into type system. So this is a very big and important change that kind of cannot be made if you want to keep backwards compatibility, but you can make it if you design a new language. Also smaller things like much more powerful types, the nothing type that is having very important usages, extension functions, and all the basic features that are improvements on Java. Objects, object declarations, object expressions, operator overloading, and properly implemented generics and much more. But so this was the initial motivation behind Kotlin. Over time, I believe Kotlin wanted to become much more than that. So Kotlin introduced few truly innovative features. The first one was Kotlin. The first one is Kotlin coroutines, which is a really, really powerful and universal set of mechanisms, and also a library that can improve our everyday development quite significantly. If you know coroutines well, you can effortlessly use the power of parallelism and concurrent programming. Another topic, another feature of Kotlin that made it way more than just an alternative to Java is the so-called multi-platform development. So Kotlin is a compiled language. Compiled languages are languages that are transformed during compilation to something more simple. When you use Kotlin JVM, it is compiled into JVM bytecode, but you can also use Kotlin JS which is compiled to JavaScript, or you can use Kotlin native, which is compiled with LLVM into native code. And you can have modules written in Kotlin that are compiled into multiple platforms. So you can, for instance, make a library that you compile into multiple platforms, and the same library you implement it once in Kotlin. You can use on JavaScript, you can use on Java, you can use on Swift, you can use wherever you want. You can also have Android and iOS projects that have shared parts, not even shared parts, but if you use it. You can even implement logic and even views on those common parts. The view part is not production ready yet. However, there are quite nice tools for that as well. If you use Jetpack Compose, there is some support for iOS, not the best one, much better for desktop or web development. But the idea is quite clear. Kotlin as a language can be compiled into multiple languages, what gives you the power that you can reuse it on multiple platforms, but also the power that you can have shared parts.
And are there particular kinds of applications that are best suited for Kotlin?
So originally, Kotlin dominated Android. And currently it's quite a strong domination. Google announced Kotlin as a not only first-class citizen, but also suggested language for Android development. All the samples are primarily in Kotlin. Libraries made by Google are designed primarily for Kotlin. Practically all the libraries support coroutines and follow a style that is more specific to Kotlin than it is to Java. So, Android is a field of Kotlin. And then Kotlin started getting popular on backend. I actually worked on Allegro. It's like a Polish Amazon, which hires more than 1,000 developers. And the majority of them, I believe, was using Kotlin for backend development. As far as I know, the numbers are that currently there are more Kotlin backend developers than there are Android Kotlin developers. Of course, the adaptation on backend is smaller than on Android, but backend is just bigger domain. There are much more backend developers worldwide than there are Android developers worldwide. So currently, Kotlin became quite popular alternative to Java on backend, and this is this is quite well supported by modern frameworks by Spring. And it's getting quite popular. Also, coroutines do help. I mean, many companies do find them useful. Now, the rest is in the process of transformation. So I know there are more and more companies that started using multi-platform Kotlin development. So you can say that Kotlin is used on iOS. Of course, on iOS, most typically there is a framework, Objective-C framework used that is generated from Kotlin code. Kotlin code generated with Kotlin native to LLVM generates iOS framework that can be used on iOS. So you might say it's getting more and more popular. I quite often see some announcements of using Kotlin for data science, but honestly, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I believe it is more a marketing than it is this is real people doing that. I think Python is quite strong in data science. Python, R, but they are quite strong in data science, but there certainly are people and there certainly are evangelists who are pushing Kotlin for data science. It is completely possible. There are plenty of libraries for Java that can be used in Kotlin. And so why not? I'm not sure what is...
That's a really excellent answer. I mean, you covered a lot of ground there. That's great. Just before we go on to talk about your sort of experience as a content creator and like how you go about putting out these best-selling books, and specifically because there are, believe it or not, there are people who skip to the ends of these podcasts just to hear all about that kind of thing. But just speaking, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the work you actually do day to day when you're not writing these great books. If people wanted to sort of hire you to do things, for example, like what are the services that you offer and what kind of work do you do with clients?
I will get to that in a moment because okay. I reminded myself a story of Kotlin.js. I started saying that I'm not sure what is the adaptation of Kotlin.js. I believe it's not very widespread, but it is good to know about this possibility because quite recently I was having this situation where I was writing a a small library or maybe a tool to synchronize nodes I'm doing with special markdown elements with my flashcards that I'm doing on Anki. So I implemented this small tool on Kotlin that was, synchronizing one with another, making nodes into flashcards or turning flashcards into nodes. It is, still not production ready. I have it on GitHub published, but it is still my experiment that I'm modifying and testing its usefulness. However, the story was that I implemented that in JVM on in Kotlin JVM using file API, etc. But to run this synchronization, I needed to open terminal and run my program. But then I realized that I'm using Obsidian for nodes. Obsidian allows you to make plugins. Plugins needs to be written in JavaScript. And I thought to myself, hey, Kotlin can be compiled to JavaScript. So I transformed this code from JVM into Kotlin JVM into Kotlin JS. Actually, I made it multi-platform and started generating both flavors. And it took, I don't know, an hour or two. It was quite an easy process. I just needed to get rid of, platform-specific elements and extract them into platform modules. And I generated an npm package, implemented a plugin, and right now I'm synchronizing my nodes with an Obsidian plugin. So it was quite cool that with no effort I could migrate a JVM library into a JavaScript library and use it on other platforms. Regarding everyday services, I've been primarily conducting workshops. I on the KT Academy, I have a bunch of workshops that I offer. However, I do concentrate on workshops during the end of the year, when everyone wants to have workshops. During October, November, December, everyone wants to have a workshop. Throughout the rest of the year, even if I need to resign from some workshop options, I am doing contracts, and I am going to start a new contract soon. At least I hope so. I mean, we have an agreement, not an official yet. So I'm not 100% sure, but I already have a few other companies who could be interested. I generally take either a short-term contracts. Or I make some kind of a deal that during the high time I'm able to conduct some workshops. However, I'm not sure if I will continue this way of working, because I'm quite happy. I'm quite excited with the contract I'm taking, and I think that I might not stop this contract in the end of the year, that I will continue with that. We just have an agreement that I can conduct one workshop a month, so that I can still teach people and share my knowledge.
That's really great. We're really glad to hear about this sort of exciting new opportunity that you might be going into. And for anyone listening, it's again, I think I mentioned earlier, some people who are either content creators themselves or who are aspiring content creators, some of the best takeaways they can get from interviews like this is sort of the real details. And so just before we go on again to talk about your books, more how you produce your books more specifically for a couple of minutes. So when you get a contract like that, do you talk with your potential employer about all this other work that you do, and let them know that that's a passion of yours and that that's something you're going to continue doing while you're doing the contract work for them?
Yes, of course. I always make that clear during the contract negotiation. It wouldn't be fair to not have this established before, and then expect and then have some expectations. I'm generally using I'm generally using either days off, either some paid if company have some paid days off in the contract, or unpaid.
Yeah, no, I know it seems, I know it's funny. These are the kinds of answers that sort of seem obvious when you've been doing it for a long time. But I think sometimes there are people who are like getting started in their career and they're like, should I tell my employer about my side project? And it's like, absolutely you should. And, if you love your side project, you want an employer who's like, please have great side projects, or even like sort of primary things that you do that you love. We want you to have, like, a good employer or client will want you to have things that you're passionate about and want you out there doing them and staying on the cutting edge and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions specifically about your book. So you write many of your books using Leanpub, which I think a lot of people listening will know that we do ebooks and stuff like that. But obviously you do these great print books as well. Do you publish your books sort of in progress on Leanpub in ebook form, and then when they're done, do you use our print ready PDF output to turn them into print?
Yes, of course. But I'm doing something more that might interest you, because I actually find it essential for my writing to publish a big number of my chapters as on my website as a form of articles. It's a form of promotion, but also it's kind of important for me to receive some feedback on those articles, and to also just share with community what I want to express in those chapters. It is more instant feedback is healthy for my own writing, and it is also, I believe, healthy for my community, for my business, etc. So I established the process where I, on Leanpub, I have my book content on GitHub. Each chapter is in a separate file, and I have it set up so that the repository is private, but I can make it publish a website. Automatically generate a website out of that. So when you have a proper link to this repository chapter, you can get the content of this chapter. So on the KT Academy backend, I set up chapters in the way that this backend service is fetching content from GitHub and publishing them as articles. Of course, they have publishment process, etc. But the point is that the articles that are on the website are always up to date with what there is in the book. If I make a change, I have a change on both my book and on my website, I find this process really useful. I mean, it's extremely simple. I'm just writing my content on GitHub. I just set up, I publish it with this title and this description on my website, and it is automatically published based on what I defined over there. And this way I can share with people. I also have I set up comments. You can comment each part of the article on my website, so that I have some feedback. I also have some answers and comments on other sources, and based on that I can improve chapters and improve the book overall.
Thanks for sharing that. That's just a really great process. So for people who are listening who might not know, Leanpub has a GitHub writing mode, as we call it, which lets you publish your book from text documents that you have in a GitHub repository. And that repository can be private or public, and Marcin's is private, but then he sort of publishes, blog posts from the same documents that are being used to create the chapters in the book, which is just a really kind of elegant kind of process, I would say, and particularly great for if you want to get sort of feedback right away from people who sort of maybe you've got sort of an audience for your blog that you can sort of publish these things to, make them public. Super useful for kinds of people, and you can also then direct them towards your book, which is just a really great idea, especially because of course the Leanpub is all about get your content out there, get feedback, and that helps you improve it both for yourself and for everyone else. I get the last question that I always like to ask on these interviews, if the guest is a Leanpub author, is if there was one feature we could build for you that you'd love Leanpub to have, or if there's one thing that after all these years still has you shaking your fist at Leanpub going, why is this so bad? If there's one thing you could ask us to fix, can you think of anything you would ask us to do?
Yes.
Okay.
But I forgot, how is it called in English? It is this feature where you can collect in the end of the book references to some words. You know what I mean? So that in the end you have a list of words and pages where those terms are defined in the book. And as far as I know, you are not supporting that. It would be really useful. And also the second thing that would be really useful is if you could reference some pointer so that you have a page number, because you will find I want to write, you will find something on the page, I don't know, 64, but after some changes it might become a page 76. So the point is that I want to say you will find something in the page, and here a pointer, some pointer, and that will be replaced during book generation with the page where this element is placed. Those two things are actually very connected. If you have this page linking, you could implement this words with pages in the end. So it's strongly connected. But this is something I've been missing, especially on my Polish books.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. So we actually do now finally have index support. It's called an index.
Oh,
That's
okay.
In Markua 0.30. I should actually do some work. I'll do some work today to kind of promote that. It's one of those things that you work on it for so long. You finally. Sometimes when you finally get something out, you're like, yay, fireworks, and sometimes you're like, thank God, But we do have index support. I believe I don't know if all of the features that we're going to have eventually are kind of current, but we do have index support, and I'll do something more about that to make that more obvious, because obviously if someone who really wants it and is a great Leanpub author and has been around for years doesn't know about it, that's our fault. And when it comes to the relative page references, so one of the reasons for that is that obviously in the sort of world of kind of like e-readers and stuff like that, relative page references don't make a lot of sense, because people can change the font size. Who knows how big their tablet or their Kindle is or what have you. But in PDFs, which we are big supporters of, there are page numbers. And if you go in your Leanpub settings and you change the page size, the page numbers are going to change. So if you wrote in your manuscript, go to page 27, and you basically change anything, like you might add a word somewhere, and that could actually change the page number. So having the idea of like a relative reference, so like you would have that pointing to something in your manuscript that obviously when you make the book, readers can't see, but it's there in the manuscript itself. Having relative page references like that, that actually cite the number, aren't just sort of internal links in an ebook, but actually change the page number that's displayed in the PDF, which ultimately would become a print book in particularly in your case. I actually don't know, but I'll look into that, and I'll definitely share that feedback with Peter, because that's a really important feature to have for print books.
You reminded myself what I truly needed that in the other book of mine, which was in Polish, about programming from scratch, JavaScript from scratch and Python from scratch. It was written, for educating people, for sharing. I mean, it was more like a social action. I was giving most of those books away for free, but what I included was exercises, and exercises have their solutions at the end of the book. And I wanted to say you will find solution at the page, at the page.
Right.
And I couldn't do that. I needed to to say you will find solution at the end of the book. So this would be useful for ebooks. Probably location is an alternative, but it would be probably tricky with location because you would need a different logic for describing a page and different for just describing location. So yeah, that's not an easy problem.
No, it's actually I interviewed someone recently who one of the sort of great pleasures of having so many programmers be Leanpub book authors is that they're people who love to find solutions to their own things. And we had someone who was using a third-party tool to kind of like basically do both of the things you just asked for, like indexes and these relative page references. But they were like, oh, I forget what it was they were putting it through. It might have been PowerShell. Like they were transforming their Leanpub manuscript into something over there and then transforming it back into something else, but that way they could get their relative page references and like so they sort of like what they were doing was like knowing where things would be in the PDF that was being produced. And the sort of thing that like sort of is somewhat sort of like it's both beautiful and kind of frustrating to us is when it's like, if you'd only asked us and made it clear that you really wanted it, we might have saved you hundreds of hours of time and then been able to provide the solution for everyone else. But definitely I'll pass along that feedback. Thank you very much for that. And we'll try and do a better job of promoting our new index feature. So, well, Marcin, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening to talk to our audience. And thank you very much for being a Leanpub author.
It's a pleasure. I must say I really enjoy writing on Leanpub, and I'm saying that honestly. I convinced a bunch of people to I mean, I'm not sure who actually used my advice, but at least a few people claimed that they will consider writing books on Leanpub instead of with a classic, publishing houses. I was so frustrated with Pact when I published my first book, and then since I moved to self-publishing, I'm so much happier. I have control over the whole process, and I can be sure that the final product is as I want it to be.
Thanks very much for that last line there. I may quote you on that. I'm working on an article about, I think I'm going to call it the joy of self-publishing in the 21st century. And that last part that you said about having control is something that so many people just love about doing. So
I mean, those are mainly small things, but the thing of having your own your own corrector that is, that you trust and you like his or her style, that's very important. Pact's correctors were terrible. They were destroying our they destroyed a lot. They were changing function type into type of function and other kind of nonsenses. We were so frustrated with working with them. Also, many other things, the title, the cover style, of course, it needs money to be able to hire someone to design your cover, and you need to pay your corrector, and it all takes more time and more money. You need to find a printing house if you want to distribute it by yourself, or you need to set up a KDP and other forms of distribution. And of course you need to promote it by yourself, but in the end you can make it, at least I feel I make it much better than what Pact could offer me. I can direct my my advertisement, my messages, the way I feel are best suited for those books. I put heart into that. They don't. So I truly see an improvement from working on all of that by myself.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing. In addition to the other stories you've told, for sharing that story. There are a lot of I've talked to a lot of authors over the years who have various experiences with various publishing companies, and sometimes even with the same company, it can be great in one experience and the other one can be bad, and things like that, and it can be very variable. But the sort of common refrain for the people who end up on Leanpub is, I just want control. I don't want it to be out of my control anymore. And that way, as you said, you could find people that you know and trust, not just someone who's thrust upon you, but even more importantly, if it's truly your passion, the experience of, you might get lucky, but you might not. And having your passion then kind of not be treated like a passion can be very frustrating. So thank you very much for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will feel good knowing that they're not alone if they've had a similar kind of experience.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.